I want to begin back in the 1960s today. There was a face and a voice that we welcomed into our living rooms each and every night to deliver the news. Who remembers Walter Cronkite? Yes. I know there's a couple that don't. That's okay. You've heard of him. There we go. What people loved about Walter Cronkite was he simply delivered the news objectively, with no side commentary, no opinions. People called him the most trusted man in America because we knew that whatever he told us was true. And at the end of every broadcast, Walter Cronkite would use the date and he would say, "And that's the way it is, March 2nd, 1965. Wouldn't it be great to have Walter Cronkite back again so that we would know what is true, so that we could actually just hear the facts and not everybody's opinions? And what happened to the news? I mean, we'd get our news now from so many different sources, and all of them are a little bit slanted. They either slant to the left, a little bit liberal, or a little bit conservative. They lean right, and it's so difficult for us to know what's true. So my curiosity about what happened to the truth led me to the fairness doctrine. Go way back now to 1949, when the FCC put in place the fairness doctrine, which regulated broadcasting companies, radio and TV. They had to, for any contentious issue, provide both sides or all sides of the story. If it was of importance for the American people, we had to hear all the sides of the story, along with the facts, so that we could decide for ourselves how we felt about the news. Now that worked wonderfully until the mid-1980s, when President Ronald Reagan opposed the fairness doctrine. Reagan and the broadcast companies said that it impeded the First Amendment rights of the broadcast companies to say what they wanted to say. And so under Reagan, the FCC put the fairness doctrine to rest. But Congress wasn't happy about that. So Congress put together a bipartisan bill to make the fairness doctrine law. Here, the truth was of greater importance than the right of the broadcasting companies to say what they wanted to say. The bill passed, and it got to Reagan's desk. And guess what he did? He vetoed it. Now, we could take the mess of our media, this media circus in which we live, and we could lay the whole blame at the feet of Ronald Reagan, except it's really not his fault entirely, because the fairness doctrine only regulated broadcast TV and radio, not cable news networks, not the internet, certainly. No social media would be affected by it today. But Reagan's actions did open a door that we cannot close. And so today you can hear whatever your itching ears want to hear. If you feel strongly about something, you can find somebody who will back you up. You can find a credible source or a dubious source, but it won't matter because it'll be a source and it will say exactly what you want it to say. And so today we have in the United States a group of people who believe that the earth is flat. We have a group of people who believe that NASA has faked all of the pictures it has taken in space and that there was no moon landing, and they can back that up. We also have people who deny that the Holocaust ever happened, and they also have their sources. And sometimes it gets even more difficult to know what to believe. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not. For example, we have a group of people in this country who they feel very strongly that vaccines are dangerous. Now, I have to go out a little bit on a limb here because I was also curious about this. And I found out that there was a study published in 1998 in the UK in which a doctor claimed that there was some connection between autism and a combined vaccine like MMR. Measles, mumps, rubella. Now, he published his study with these results, And he did this before his study was peer-reviewed. Now, the peer review process is very important. When I'm studying the Bible, I won't read a journal article unless it has been peer-reviewed, because I want to make sure that I'm not just getting one person's crazy idea and nobody else in the field has looked at this work. But this story, this report about vaccines was published before it was peer-reviewed, so it was out there. When it was peer-reviewed, it was immediately debunked. But the doctor who wrote it went on to write a few more papers that also were spread all over the globe. And eventually, he lost his medical license for spreading false information. But the damage was done because there were so many parents who had autistic children who were looking for a reason to understand, to explain what happened to their child. And when they heard this possible idea that it was the vaccines their own doctors recommended that might have caused it, they hung on to that information and they spread it and they campaigned against vaccines. And today, we have measles again. And measles was eradicated in this country in the year 2000. If you wanted to catch measles, you would have to travel abroad and catch measles and then come back to the United States in order to have it. But today we have more and more cases because people in good faith accepted a report that was not true. So what is truth? How can we tell? Even our news sources cannot be completely trusted to give us the truth. Rachel Maddow of MSNBC, which is pretty clearly left-leaning, was sued for saying something that was not true. The judge dismissed the charge against her, saying that she had stretched the truth within allowable limits. What does that mean? What are those limits? When does the truth become so little of the truth as to be called a lie? Likewise, Tucker Carlson, previously of Fox News, also was sued for telling lies. And in his case, the lawyers for Fox News, and they argued persuasively and convinced the judge that no rational human being could listen to anything that Tucker Carlson said without skepticism. This person was broadcasting, and people believed he was sharing the news, but none of it is believable. So what is the truth? In our gospel reading that Betty shared with us this morning, Pilate asked Jesus, "What is truth?" And I wonder how he asked that. Like, was he being sarcastic, or was he just truly curious? And what did Jesus say? We don't know. It's not in the story. Truth is such an odd idea for us to understand, because what's true for one person may not be true for another. Now, in our story today, Jesus is arrested. He's taken first before the Sanhedrin, and then he's taken to Pilate. Pilate is the governor of Judea. Pilate is actually not so much a governor as you might think. He is more of a military man. He understands brute force. He doesn't understand diplomacy. But here he is, leading and governing over Judea, and they bring Jesus to him, and he has a conversation with Jesus, and then he goes back to the Jewish authorities and reports, "I think he's innocent. I find no case against him." Now, we know what happens because we've read the story so many times. If you continue to read chapter 18 and into chapter 19, you'll find that Pilate actually tries 3 different times. He brings Jesus out and says, "I think he's innocent. Can we let him go now?" And the people say, "No, crucify him, crucify him." And then he brings him out again. "Here's your king. How about we let him go?" And the people say, "No, crucify him, crucify him." They are emotionally invested in the story, and they want Jesus crucified. And of course, we know how it ends. But what I want us to do today is to look at just the text that Betty read for us, the text that's in your bulletin, and let's channel our inner Walter Cronkite, or whoever you know in your life who is really objective, and let's see what Walter Cronkite might have reported had he been reporting on this event. Now, in order for me to do this, I have to use my teleprompter. because I'm really curious to see what you think, and just be gracious. I did my best here. Here's what Walter Cronkite might have said. Several hours ago, a Jewish man called Jesus of Nazareth was arrested on charges of blasphemy. After a conversation between the prisoner and Pilate, the governor of Judea, Pilate made a statement to the Jewish authorities that he found Jesus to be innocent, stating, "I find no case against him." Is that pretty much it? Okay, so now let's go to the right for a moment. Let's imagine that you're living at that time. You are one of perhaps the Jewish authorities. You are a very conservative, right-leaning reporter. What might you say? Jewish authorities finally arrested that troublemaker Jesus of Nazareth and took him to Pilate. Even with all the evidence of Jesus' revolutionary activities, Pilate tried to let him off the hook. This is a miscarriage of justice. This man believes he is God, and according to Jewish law, he must be executed. That's what a very conservative Jewish person of that day might have said. Now let's go left, and we'll see what a progressive, left-leaning reporter might say. Under cover of night, Roman soldiers arrested Jesus of Nazareth, a poor itinerant preacher and healer. He was taken before Pilate, who found him to be innocent. This is not normal for Pilate, who seems to enjoy a good crucifixion. But it's a win for Jesus and all innocent people like him. If Pilate finally grows a backbone, Jesus will be released. That's my best take on what the left might report on the very same thing. Now, we've heard the objective view, the far right, and the far left, but here's what I want you to notice. Everybody reported on Pilate. Nobody did an interview with Jesus. Nobody got his say on it. We know very little bit about him, but the people of the day would have heard only about Pilate. And the father of Fox News, Roger Ailes, said, "If you have two guys on a stage, and one says, 'I have the answer to the Middle East problem,' and the other guy falls off the stage into the orchestra pit, guess which one will be on the evening news?" Jesus is standing there saying, "I not only have the solution to the problem in the Middle East, I have the solution for humanity." But all eyes are on Pilate. Everybody wants to know what Pilate's going to do. Everybody is criticizing Pilate. He needs to grow a backbone. He's trying to let this guy off the hook. He needs to be tougher. He needs to do this or that. We're all looking at Pilate, and we are forgetting about Jesus. And somebody needs to speak for Jesus. And where were all those people that Jesus fed and healed and taught? Where were all the people who were cheering for him a week before? They aren't even in the story. They have no voice here. If they are there, they're silent, or the newscaster ignored them. We must speak out for Jesus. Somebody has to speak up for Jesus. And that is exactly what Paul is telling Timothy in our epistle reading today. Now, let me give you a little bit of context so that you know what's going on. Paul is in prison for the second time, and his trial is not going well. And he has an idea that he is going to die this time. He is not going to survive. And so he writes a second letter to Timothy, and he gives him some instruction. He wants Timothy to bring some of his personal things to him in the prison because he knows he's not going to get back out to his home. And he also tells Timothy this: there are some false teachers in Timothy's church in Ephesus, and he wants Timothy to confront these false teachers. Now, according to scholar Tim Mackey, we don't know what the teachers are teaching, but we only know that it is not the gospel of Jesus, and that whatever they're teaching takes people's hope away. They're saying the resurrection already happened, and one of the biggest hopeful parts of the gospel message is that when we all die, we will be together again. And that hope has been taken from the people by these false teachers. Now, these teachers have targeted the influential and the wealthy members of the church in Ephesus. So they've got a little power base going on. And Paul is telling Timothy, you have got to confront them. You must stop them, because if you don't, the time will come when people's itching ears will listen to whatever they want, and they will not listen to the gospel. And it's going to cost you something, Timothy, because if you go up against the power structure that they've set up, you're going to get hurt. You're going to suffer. You're going to be persecuted. But it's worth it. Paul tells him it's worth it, because in that moment when you are suffering for the message of Jesus, it's not that Jesus is far from you. No. It's in that dark moment that you feel the presence of Christ in you more real than you ever have in your life. This, I think, is the message that God has for us today, the same message that Paul has for Timothy, to stand up for Jesus, to stand up for the message of the gospel of Jesus Christ, to take our eyes off of Pilate for a few minutes and look at Jesus and ask ourselves, what does this policy, or what do these people, how do they affect the gospel message of Jesus? Is this lining up with the message of Jesus? And how can I share that message more? But even then, we have a problem, don't we? Because we all disagree on what the message of Jesus is. Some of us see Jesus as a warrior king who's going to come in and just destroy his enemies and take control. And some of us see Jesus as the servant who's going to wash feet and tend to our wounds. So what is truth? Let me tell you a story, and it's a true story. You can believe me. This past week, I had a couple of days of trouble getting back from the West Coast. I was in the Portland, Oregon airport for 2 days. And the first day when I arrived at the airport, you get there 2 hours before your flight, you're all set, and then you find out your flight's delayed, and then it's delayed again. Then it's delayed again. Now you've missed your connecting flight. Now you have to be rebooked, and then you get rebooked, and then the next flight is also delayed. Then the airport closes completely because of the sheer winds blowing in off the river, and the rain is coming down, and there's a big storm going on, and I'm sitting there, it's been hours, and I'm on my phone trying to find any way that I can get to Detroit that day. And in that frustration, in the midst of this mess in my head, just for a second, and I don't know why, I looked up. And you know how there's all these windows in an airport. So you can watch the planes land and you can see the planes taking off. And of course there were no planes because the stormy weather kept the planes from landing and taking off. I look out the window and the rain has stopped just for a moment. And the sun peeked out just for a moment. And the most brilliant rainbow I think I've ever seen forms just outside the window, and it is sitting on the runway. I can see the end of the rainbow. No gold, just letting you know. I can see the end of it. The angle was just right. Now, I know if you walk towards a rainbow, it moves, right? Because it's your perspective. But this particular rainbow was sitting right on the runway. Now, what does the rainbow remind us of? Promise of God. It is a sign of God's love and covenant protection for us. And in that moment, I knew the truth. And the truth is simply that we are loved. We are all loved, every last one of us. You are valuable, you matter, you are known. There is someone who understands you and who walks beside you and who never leaves you. And we are all part of the same family, bound together by the love of God. That's the truth. And if we can take our eyes off Pilate long enough to remember that that's the truth, it will bring us some joy and some peace as we move through these weeks. And that, I'm convinced, is the truth that we are to carry with us and share with others. Now, today we are going to come up here later to the communion table. We are going to take the body of Christ into our bodies. And with that comes Not just the privilege of being Christian, of carrying Christ, but the responsibility of carrying Christ into a world that is hurting, a world that needs to know that there is love, and that love will prevail. And that's what Paul wanted Timothy to do, to carry that love, to defend the love of God, to speak up for Jesus. And that's what Pilate could not hear, because the more he tried to do what was right, the louder the people's voices got, and the louder the voice, the more often it's repeated, the more it's believed. There is someone who said, tell a big lie and say it long enough and loud enough and repeat it often enough, and people will begin to believe it. And the people were saying, crucify him, crucify him, crucify him. And they were becoming emotionally attached to that message. And Pilate did it. He crucified him. Think the opposite of that. Think if we carry the message of God's love with us wherever we go, and we say it again and again and again, louder and louder than the voices that we hear. That's what God is asking us to do, to remember that love, to carry that love, and to share that love wherever we go. And that's the way it is. March 2nd, 2025.